A ship, a jet, or a sub? Which would you pick? The Navy has to choose advancing just one right away because of budget limitations. Defense News Naval Warfare reporter Megan Eckstein breaks down the decision in this week's Actionable Intelligence.
Navy Secretary Thomas Harker recently signed out an FY 2023 memo just very early in the budget planning process for the next upcoming fiscal year. But basically his understanding of the fiscal situation is that the Navy won't have any great increases in its funding levels, and therefore there are three major upcoming modernization projects. And in his assessment, he believes the Navy will only be able to really prioritize one of the three. That's not to say the other two will be canceled, but the Navy needs to pick one of three upcoming projects, which are DDG-X, the Navy's next destroyer program, SSN-X, which is the Navy's next attack submarine program, and Next Generation Air Dominance, which is the Navy's next fighter jet program. All three of these, just by circumstance, are in early phases of development right now. They originally were on different timelines, but have kind of found themselves bundled together, and the Navy's worried that with a flat budget projection coming up for fiscal year 2023, that they will only be able to fully prioritize one of the three programs. Currently, the Navy uses its Arleigh Burke class destroyer. It's gone through several iterations of design. It was originally a design taken from the Ticonderoga class cruisers, which is the Navy's big surface combatant. It has a lot of missile cells. It has a big radar. It's basically meant to go out, patrol the ocean surface, see incoming air threats, see incoming surface threats, and have the offensive capability and defensive capability to take out any targets. Sometimes they're used to protect the aircraft carrier, sometimes they're used to go out on individual patrols. So ultimately, while the Navy is happy with the current Flight 3 design of the Arleigh Burke class destroyer, they need something next, which is where originally Future Surface Combatant, then it became DDG Next, now it's DDG-X, but ultimately this new program will be the next large surface combatant the Navy fields. It's expected to have a larger radar in the future to see more and more complex threats, such as incoming hypersonic weapons. It's meant to carry larger weapons, which could include hypersonic weapons. It's also meant to have the electrical capacity for things like directed energy, laser weapons, jamming capabilities, and really the Navy just can't accommodate all of those needs with the current Arleigh Burke class platform. So DDG-X will take the Navy sort of to the next level of being able to have defensive and offensive capabilities in a surface combatant. In the late 1990s, the Navy began designing and fielding the Virginia-class attack submarine. At the time, there wasn't a major submarine threat, and so the focus of the Virginia program was on a lower-cost attack submarine. It could be stealthy, it could get into shallow waters near a shoreline, it could focus on land attack missions, which is to say it could sneak in towards an enemy coastline, launch Tomahawk land attack missiles at a land threat. And that was the primary focus of the Virginia-class design. Now, everything is different for the Navy submarine community. Not much of a focus on land attack, and a much greater focus on finding Russian submarines, for example, finding adversary submarines under the water, going after adversary surface ships, and kind of lurking underneath. This SSN-X submarine would need to go faster. It would need to have a much greater payload capacity. It would need to have, more weapons on board, for example. It might need to have different weapons on board, for example, if the Navy is looking at longer ranges that they want to be operating in. It may or may not need the capacity to interact with unmanned vessels, which is something new the Navy is experimenting with in the undersea domain. While they could make incremental upgrades, the Navy is looking at something entirely different in the way they want to operate the attack submarine fleet. They're looking at a different mission set, they're looking at a different enemy, and really they're looking to evolve beyond the Virginia platform and into something very different. The Navy currently has a blend of 4th generation and 5th generation fighter jets in its inventory. The 4th generation aircraft is the Super Hornet. The Navy is actually experiencing somewhat of a readiness challenge with the Super Hornets. They're going through and extending the life of several of them and adding capability at the same time in the hopes of having a very capable 4th generation fighter jet out through the mid-2030s. At the same time, they're buying the new F-35C carrier variant of the Joint Strike Fighter, which is the 5th generation fighter jet, increased stealth, increased electronic warfare and jamming capabilities, increased communication with the entire rest of the fleet to collect and share data with ships, with Marines on the ground, with the entire joint force. So the Navy is really hoping to continue having this 4th gen, 5th gen blend out through the 2030s. At that point, the Super Hornets, despite the life extensions that they're going through now, will be phased out of the fleet. The Navy's plans for future operations really emphasize undersea warfare. So when you look at which of the 3 programs they may be more inclined to want to keep on track and to fully fund, SSNX, the Future Attack Submarine, may win out in the sense that future operational plans call for a larger attack submarine force and really emphasize the need for underwater capabilities, undersea warfare, associated sensors and unmanned vehicles. That's really an emphasis in Navy future operational plans, and so that may give SSNX, the Future Attack Submarine, a leg up on the other 2.
Thanks, Megan. And now for defense industry headlines. 2 shipbuilders have each displayed their conceptual designs for the South Korean Navy's Future Light Aircraft Carrier, that's codenamed CVX. Models were displayed in Korea at the Maritime Defense Industry Exhibition, or MADEX, on June 9th. Hyundai Heavy Industries is proposing a carrier with an optional ski jump ramp that could be removed to accept a catapult. The carrier would also support vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, as well as drones. Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering showed its CVX proposal, which offers a flight deck-based carrier featuring an anti-drone defense system. On the first day of MADEX, the shipbuilders signed a memorandum of understanding with Italy's Fincantieri to assist with the conceptual design for the CVX project. The U.S. Army selected 2 companies to design and build prototype sensors for its next-generation airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance system. That's according to a June 11 announcement. The Army awarded other transaction authority contracts on June 11th to both L3 Communications Integrated Systems and Raytheon Applied Signal Technology. The OTA agreements, subject to less stringent competitive requirements to speed up prototyping, are valued at $4.37 million over an 8-month period in Phase 1, but the overall project could ultimately net the companies $49 million during the life of the project. And that's it in industry news this week. When we return, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack will give you tips for getting out of the rent cycle and buying a home.